Okay, so 4.1, we're going to talk about Radian Measure this morning. This is kind of part 2. Can everybody see that okay on your screen? All right, so pretty similar to what we did yesterday with degrees. I'm going to kind of go around the coordinate plane, and we're going to kind of label this. So sometimes we use Radian Measure, and this is something we're going to utilize quite a bit as we begin to get into the unit circle. So we know that in standard position, the initial side is going to start at 0. Now, when we're talking about radians, basically that just simply means that we're putting our answers in terms of pi. So as we go around, we still have 90 degrees. Well, at 90 degrees, that is pi over 2. And as we go around the circle here, 180 is the equivalent of pi. 270 is the equivalent of 3 pi halves. And then as we get all the way around to 360, that's 2 pi. You think about if we were, finding the circumference of a circle, we know that it's 2 pi times the radius. So kind of that should explain a little bit as to all the way around being 2 pi. We're not really utilizing a radius here. But some things you might want to think about, and we're going to be putting our answers in terms of radians, but knowing what those values are. So, at pi over 2, if I type that into my calculator, we know that pi over 2 is going to give me about 1.57. We know that pi is 3.14, so that'd be kind of our value there if we're putting it in decimal form. If I'm putting in 3 pi over 2, that value would be about 4.71. And then if I'm doing 2 pi, we're looking at about 6.28. So that's kind of decimal form of our radians there. You can kind of think of this, if I were to say, what's the measure of this angle here, going around just like we still did with degrees yesterday. In degrees, I would say we would estimate that to be, 45 degrees. Well, how do we write that in terms of radians? Well, 45 degrees is a fourth of this, if I go all the way around to pi. So 45 degrees, we would say, is pi over 4. If I would, go another 45 in between on the second quadrant, I've got pi fourths. This is really 2 pi fourths. So this would have to be 3 pi fourths. Now I'm not going to do every value here as we go all the way around, because when we get into the unit circle, we will talk about all the different values as we go around. But pretty similar to what we did yesterday with degrees. Let's take a look at a few examples similar to what we did yesterday. So this first one, we're determining the quadrants. So let's go through a few of those. So if I said, what quadrant would a radian of 3, where would that be in my, on my, in other words, where would that lie? Now, if we go back up here and look, we know that if I'm at 0 here, my initials, I go around, pi over 2 is 1.57, and pi is 3.14, so it's going to lie in that second quadrant. Let's do a negative one. How about negative 4.57? Remember, I'll just draw a little picture off here to the side. You know, if I'm at 0, 1.57, 3.14, 4.71, and 6.28. Now I'm going negatively, so I'm going around this direction. So there's a negative 3.14. I'm going to a negative 4.57. Well, a negative 4.57 is going to take me, still here in the second quadrant. How about you try this one? Pi thirds, what quadrant would that lie in? Again, we know this is pi halves, and here's pi, so pi thirds has got to lie in the first quadrant. Again, think about if I take 180 and divide it by 3, I know that 180 divided by 3 is 60, right? So it's 60 is going to lie in that first quadrant. Let's do another one. How about 5 pi fourths? So one thing you might think about on this one, 5 pi fourths, well, we know it's basically pi and 1/4. Well, pi is going to get me all the way to here. Then I'm going to do another pi fourth. So pi fourths, that's going to keep me in that third quadrant. Any questions on determining the quadrant, where we're going there with the radians there? Let's look at a couple where we're just simply sketching the angle. And again, we're going to sketch the angle in standard form. So let's say we want to sketch a radian of 6. So we know that it's 6.28 all the way around. Here we're at 3.14. And here we're at 4.71, 1.57. So 6, I'm going to start here. I'm going to go all the way around. So if I'm sketching that angle, I'd say it's a pretty good guesstimate there for that one. How about you try sketching negative 3 pi fourths? So on this one, we know it's a negative 3 pi fourths. So again, standard position, we know we're going to go around clockwise. The way I think of this, 3 pi fourths, we'll think about what's 3/4 of pi, or 3/4 of 180, and it's 135. So if I'm going negatively, there's a negative 90, and then I'm going to go another 45. So there would be my angle there. So I would be in the third quadrant there for that particular angle. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to finding our coterminal angles in radians. And again, we're doing our plus and minus, our positive and our negative on that. Remember yesterday we told you that basically you're adding or subtracting 360. So in terms of radians, basically all we're doing is we're adding and subtracting 2 pi, because all the way around is, or 180 is 2 pi. So if I said let's find the positive and negative coterminal angles for pi thirds, again, I'm going to add and I'm going to subtract 2 pi. So if I'm doing the positive, now when I add these, I'm going to have to get a common denominator here. So if I do pi thirds plus or minus, well, to get a common denominator here, 2 pi would be 6 pi thirds. That make that 2 pi. So my positive coterminal angle would be 1 pi plus 6 pi, which is 7 pi thirds. And then my negative coterminal angle would be negative 5 pi thirds. Again, 1 minus 6, that's how I got the negative 5. 1 plus 6, that's how I got the positive 7. Everybody follow what I just did there? Why don't you try this one on your own? Why don't you try to find the positive and negative coterminal angles of 5 pi fourths? Again, remember we're going to add and subtract 2 pi. Okay, so on this one, 5 pi fourths, I'm going to add and subtract. Now my common denominator here is 4. So it's going to be 8 pi fourths. So 5 plus 8, that'd give me 13 pi fourths. And then my negative 1, 5 pi fourths minus the 8 pi fourths is going to give me negative 3 pi fourths. And those would be my positive and negative coterminal angles there for that. Let's do one example with complementary and supplementary.